Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome to the show. I'm Lisa Williams. Today we have a rare treat. We have Dr. Hadiyah-Nicole Green. She is one of less than 100 Black women physicists in the U.S. Dr. Green is an assistant professor at Tuskegee University and was recently awarded a $1.1 million grant to develop a cancer treatment involving lasers and nanoparticles. Dr. Green is 35 years old and the first in her family to go to college, let alone earn a doctorate. Dr. Green is also the second African-American woman to receive a Ph.D. in physics from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Dr. Green has a personal connection to the cancer research she's conducting. She lost both her mother and father early, and she lost her aunt to the disease, and later her uncle was diagnosed. Dr. Green came up with the treatment-altering idea of using lasers to treat cancer to avoid the same side effects that are associated with chemotherapy and radiation. Dr. Hadiyah Green is on fire. She is known for her humility, determination, and positive aura. As a graduate student, Dr. Green remembers seeing other Black women in her department, but often in support roles such as secretaries, janitorial staff, and lab technicians. Dr. Green mentors young girls and said, "Young Black girls don't see scientists as often as they see Beyonce. It's important to know that our brains are capable of more." She also said, "When opportunity found me, I was prepared." Dr. Hadiyah Green likens her story to that of the little engine that could, simply because she believed that she could. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Hadiyah-Nicole Green.
Hi, Ms. Williams. Thank you so very much for having me on your show today.
We're glad to have you. Well, let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about the growing number of Black women in business, how we've evolved, and what it'll take to help African American women in business run successful businesses. Let's get started. Black women have always had an entrepreneurial spirit. From our great-grandmothers who cleaned houses for a living and sold fish dinners at churches, to the many African American women who rose to the tops of their industries, including Michelle Obama, the first African American First Lady of the United States, Sheila C. Johnson, founder of BET, becoming the first African American woman billionaire, Oprah Winfrey, having the #1 daytime talk show in America, Serena Williams, #1 in women's singles tennis, Janice Bryant, owner of the largest minority woman-owned employment agency in the United States, and Ursula Burns, the first African-American woman CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And of course, the list goes on and on. In fact, according to the 2015 State of Women-Owned Business Report, the number of women-owned businesses grew by 74% between 1997 and 2015. The report also stated that 33% of women-owned firms are owned by minority women, and Black females are amongst the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the U.S. It's wonderful to know that African American women entrepreneurs are the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs in the U.S. What a great statistic. So it's important that we don't let this momentum die. Now, more than ever, African American women entrepreneurs need resources available to help them not just be in business, but grow in business. The biggest hurdle African American women business owners face is that many are first-generation entrepreneurs, and they lack exposure to other Black women in business that have successful businesses from which they can glean habits and proven processes from. Let's look at an example of just how important having a role model accessible to you can be. Here is what Jessica Alba, actress and CEO of The Honest Company, said about having someone that you can call on.
As far as mentors go, countless. I was not shy about making phone calls to many people. I've been fortunate enough to know people like Tory Burch and Diane von Furstenberg, and they, got lots of emails and phone calls from me along the way with tears in my eyes saying, I don't know if this is possible. Why is everyone telling me no? What do I do? What does it even mean to get venture capital? What is venture capital? What's a board? Like, I just didn't know all these business terms. And so they helped me understand it. And it's nice having women that you can look to and rely on.
Incidentally, her husband, Cash Warren, a Yale graduate, producer, and tech investor, introduced Jessica to his childhood friend, Brian Lee, an entrepreneur who co-founded LegalZoom. And the women Jessica reached out to, Tory Burch, who is a New York fashion designer, and Diane von Furstenberg, who is a billion-dollar fashion designer. Unfortunately, most African-American women don't have the same access and connections that Jessica Alba was blessed with. Black female entrepreneurs need a supportive network of African-American women business owners that we can learn from. It's time to talk, share, and provide resources and roadmaps to Black women in business. We need successful mentors to inspire African-American women on their journey in business. I have lined up a variety of successful, prominent, and leading African-American women in business across many industries to share their paths and secrets to their success. They will discuss their journey not only as women in business, but more importantly, how they grew successful businesses in spite of the unique challenges faced by African-American women business owners. Forgive my cloudy voice, but the show must go on. So let's get into the show.
How do you feel being a part of this historical time for African-American women and women in business in general?
Oh, this is always one of those questions where when I wake up in the morning, I don't put on the mask of being a Black woman. I just wake up in the morning and I start running towards my dreams and goals. So putting that in context of being a Black woman, I think that it's important for other women to see if I can do it, if other Black women can do it, that they can do it as well. So in that context, I think it's critical that we share our stories to inspire others. But also, I'm being inspired by the other stories that are being shared and the other women that I'm seeing who are doing it. So in the larger context of this time in history, I think the universe will align to conspire to help us accomplish our goals and dreams. So once the momentum is started, and that's one of the laws in physics, once things get going, it's easier to keep them moving. So it's like, okay, let's, in a sense, jump on the bandwagon and start chasing our dreams. If it's the time to make it happen, let's do it.
I love it. I love it. And thanks for that little physics tip. So, Dr. Green, a good story isn't a good story until we can understand where you started. And most young girls, let alone young African-American girls, aren't thinking about being a physicist when they're 6 years old. Tell us how you got started.
Yes, neither was I. When I was 6 years old, I was playing with Cabbage Patch dolls, braiding their hair, jump roping, double dutching, writing talk on the sidewalk, and skipping over the numbers. I didn't have a concept of a scientist. And even when I started getting a concept of a scientist, it was of the old white male, Albert Einstein, and the NASA scientists who did not look like me.
Sure.
So when I grew up, I thought I was going to do hair because I was good at braiding. I had gotten pretty good at braiding hair for my Cabbage Patch dolls. And
that's a nice goal at 6.
I mean, you never know what God has set you aside to do. So for me, I didn't have that childhood aspiration to be a scientist. I have 2 older brothers. And my middle brother, who's 5 years older than me, he used to have me do his homework. When I was in kindergarten, I was doing his homework when he was in the 4th grade. And he was so fascinated by how he could teach me something. He made learning so fun for me. So
nice.
He taught me how to do his math problems and spell his vocabulary words. And it helped him by, having his homework assignments done, and it was fun for me. He ended up flunking the 4th grade, which is funny, but it's the sad truth, bittersweet. But that, I think, gave me the foundation for having my foundation in math. That early exposure to problems that maybe were considered too advanced for a 6-year-old or a kindergartner, he didn't make it seem like it was too advanced. It was just like, oh, you can do it. Let me show you how to break it down, and this is how you crack the puzzle. And so there was
let me jump in for a minute. So really, he was already showing his management skills early on.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
I love it.
Which carried him throughout his life, because we would call that bossy. And whenever I would ask a question, because I was always super curious, he would make me look it up in the encyclopedia. So he created the researcher in me, and he created that desire to crack the puzzle, to crack the problem.
How about that? Yeah.
Right. And so when I go back to that early, it was just getting those fundamental skills and doing the seek and find puzzles, and that created the foundation. So then as I went on through high school, I always made straight A's in math. And in college, I started off as a computer science major, then electrical engineering, and then math. And I was coming out of a calculus class. Now, all of this happened my first semester of my freshman year. And I was coming out of a calculus class, and she's now Dr. Aisha Fields. At the time, she was working on her Ph.D. in physics at Alabama A&M University. She saw me coming out of this calculus class and pulled me to the side and had a conversation with me about what was I going to do in life, and I must be pretty smart taking calculus as a freshman. And I'm like, no, I just have really good study skills. Math has always been fun. And she literally challenged me to major in physics.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, no, physics is hard. Everybody knows that. And she said, who told you physics was hard? People who aren't taking calculus as a freshman. You can do it. Don't let anybody else tell you what's possible or hard for you based on their limitations and their reality. And that was my first lesson in taking other people's reality off of me and chasing my own dreams and defining my reality for myself. And it was based on that one conversation and having her as a mentor and almost literally following in her footsteps until a major life event happened, and I'll tell you about that. That changed my direction. But because of her, I was majoring in physics, and I was focused on a career in optical communications and fiber optics with lasers, and I was planning to go into the field of satellite and fiber optic communications and revolutionize the way that people receive cable television and the internet.
Okay.
And so that was the path. And then
So you thought.
So I thought. And then when I graduated from Alabama A&M, my family came down and we went back to St. Louis, and my aunt who raised me announced that she had cancer and that she would rather die than experience the side effects of chemotherapy and radiation, and it shook me. Her announcement shook me, but then I was the person who was her primary caregiver during the last 3 months of her life, and I took care of her, and I saw firsthand the horrors of cancer and the devastation that it caused in her body as she deteriorated. Then once she made her transition, 3 months later, my uncle who raised me was diagnosed with cancer and given 6 months to live.
My God.
He decided to take the treatments, and I was his caregiver, and I saw firsthand the horrors of cancer treatments on the body and how it diminished him to less than half the man that he was. It shriveled him. It turned his nails black. His hair fell out. His eyebrows fell out. His skin looked like it was burned. And he lost about 150 pounds. So
you actually saw the other side. You saw both sides.
I saw both sides. And seeing that in such a short time period, I'm like, there has to be a better way. This does not make sense to me as a physicist, as a person who doesn't have the traditional medical or biological training. I don't understand why, if you have cancer in your lungs or your pancreas or your ovaries or your breast, Why does your hair fall out? It didn't make sense. Why can't you just treat the cancer where it is? Why can't you treat it locally? This doesn't make sense. And so I had the bright idea to use the same technology that we use with cable and internet to treat cancer.
What made you correlate the two? Come on, help us understand. How did you bridge that together to consider that?
It was one of those things that had to be a divinely inspired idea. I just woke up with it one morning. And I'm like, why aren't we using this kind of technology and that kind of precision? Because if I make a phone call, your whole neighborhood doesn't ring, just your cell phone in your house in your room. Why can't we make a phone call to cancer and tell it to die at that location of that tumor?
Amen.
So that was the vision. So I jotted this down in my notebook. I applied to graduate school, got a fellowship to continue my education, and I went to graduate school to develop this treatment for cancer.
I love it. Wow. And tell us a bit about your experience in graduate school as you were evolving.
So when I started, there was only one other Black woman in the history of the University of Alabama who had started and finished the program. There were others who had come through. Only 3 other African Americans, male or female, had gotten a Ph.D. in that physics program before me. So this was not, let me rephrase that. This was one of the roads less traveled.
Okay.
And the physics department historically had not been collaborating with the Cancer Center.
Okay.
And not only am I pioneering the road as an African-American female in the physics department, which is historically dominated by white males, I'm now going into this world with this big, bright idea that's completely different to most standard approaches for cancer therapies, and saying I'm going to approach this problem with my expertise in physics, and I don't want to become a medical doctor in order to do it.
Right. Because you don't have to.
Because I don't have to. I'm looking at role models like Madame Marie Curie, who invented the X-ray machines that are used in hospitals still today. And she was a physicist.
How about that?
Who developed something that revolutionized the way we handle medical care, not just in America, but around the world. And I'm like, okay, if she can do that back then, what can I do now? And I do know that she eventually died from the X-rays that she developed. So
okay. Well,
there's still, lessons to learn, and with the technology, and I'm like, okay, I can make things safer as I develop them. I don't have to expose myself to radiation or things, because a lot of the drugs that are used to treat cancer can cause cancer. So they are supposed to be effective in small doses, but I incorporated 2 different processes for treating cancer. One uses an FDA-approved antibody that targets the surface of tumor cells. In the process of targeting the tumor cells, it delivers what are called nanoparticles. And I'll take just a second to explain what a nanoparticle is.
Please
it's
do.
a super tiny particle on a nano scale. And a nanometer is a unit of measurement like a centimeter or a millimeter. And it's like 1 billion times smaller than a meter. So if you can imagine the back of a penny and Abraham Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial, imagine his eyelash. You following me?
Yeah.
Okay. Now imagine
small.
something 1 million times smaller than the eyelashes of Abraham Lincoln inside the Lincoln Memorial in the back of a penny. And that's when you get down to the nanoscale. You can't see it with the eye, so you have to use super high-powered microscopes to be able to see things on this scale. But these particles take on properties. so that if you excite them with the laser, they can heat up. And the way that this laser excites the nanoparticles has the same concept of what's called resonance. And I'll give you an example of resonance. Resonance is what happens when you blow a dog whistle and only dogs can hear it, not humans.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the way the laser works is like the dog's whistle, and the nanoparticle is working like the dog's ear. So the laser is only going to interact with the nanoparticle and not anything else around it. So you can have...
So the laser wakes up the nanoparticle.
Yes.
Ignites
yes.
it.
Yes. And it causes it to heat up the cells and causes cell death just at the location with the laser precision.
Wow.
So that's the type of accuracy that we're doing. So the delivery mechanism of this FDA-approved drug to deliver the nanoparticles to the site of the tumor, that's the biggest subject matter for the $1 million grant that I was awarded to optimize that treatment to move it towards clinical trials. The other thing that I've done is I've developed a treatment for cancer that is working in mice. After a single 10-minute treatment with the laser and nanoparticles, it induces approximately 100% tumor regression, which basically means I can kill the cancer at the site of the tumor only without causing, we are not observing the side effects that are experienced with chemotherapy and radiation in our mice right now. So that still needs to be further tested. But I'm extremely excited about that technology because if I can demonstrate this in mice, that's a huge first step. And there have been other people who have theories about things, who've gotten grants about things, and they've received so many different awards and so many different accolades for treatments that aren't even working this effectively in mice. And that's a first huge step before we can even start discussing applying this to humans. So I'm super excited about this treatment.
Okay, so that was amazing. Now we're going to take that down and break it down another level.
Okay.
So, number one, in the simplest terms, explain what you just explained in a simpler version. So basically you are doing what to do what?
Okay, thank you for asking me that. My aunt who raised me had a third-grade education, and when I would come home from school, she would ask me what I learned. And if I told her something that she didn't understand, she would say, I don't know any more than you did before. I don't know any more than I did before you start talking. There's no point in saying anything if it doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
So let me try to break it down, right? Okay. So what I am doing is shrinking tumors and killing cancer.
Yeah.
I'm doing that in the simplest terms. In the simplest terms. That's what I'm doing. I'm using a laser that's similar to a laser pointer. It's a little bit bigger, but that's the concept. I'm using something similar to a laser pointer and these little bitty tiny particles that heat up only when you shine the laser on it.
And how long this research, this grant, how long do we have to wait until this is available to people?
That is a very good question. I am hoping that with new support and new collaborations, that this is something that I can move closer to clinical trials by the time the grant is over in 5 years. With more support and being able to hire more people to help me, it's a possibility that it could be available for humans in clinical trials before 5 years from now.
And when you say more support, what does that look like? How can we, as a community, help in some way?
Thank you for asking that question. So there are several steps that I need help with. The simplest one is financial help, financial support.
Raising capital.
Raising capital, yes.
Okay.
And that's where I'm having to put on my business hat, which happens some when you become the director of a lab and you have to manage students, which is the same as managing employees and navigating and managing time and teaching courses and building your brand and that whole process. But
Sure.
Coming over completely into the business world, in order for my therapy to be available for someone to walk into some place like the Cancer Centers of America or urgent care, for example, and say, I'd like Dr. Green's cancer treatment, I have to commercialize the technology and go through clinical trials.
And so the capital that you would need to raise would go towards what?
So there are a few steps. Primarily, the first step is ownership of the intellectual property of what I've developed. So I have a GoFundMe account to raise money for my patent attorney fees to own the intellectual property of the cancer treatments that I've developed. The second step is to have money for research and development. And as an academician or a professor at a university, I'm able to write grants, which is part of a competition to secure money to pay for research and development. So in that vein, I've been writing grants, and I just won, which is really humbling. In my first 2 years of being a professor, I recently was awarded a $1.1 million grant from the VA through the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Research Scientist Training Program, their research and development arm.
Awesome.
Which is huge, especially realizing that there are some people who go their whole careers without getting a grant this size. So this is really big. So being able to have more money for research and development means that I can not just test this. My initial treatments have been demonstrated in head and neck cancer. But with every $500,000 to $1 million, I can demonstrate this in breast cancer, and ovarian cancer, and pancreatic cancer, and brain cancer, lung cancer, skin cancer. So the more money that I have, the more I can demonstrate how broad and effective this is and demonstrate that this really is a different approach than traditional chemotherapy and radiation. So that's
amazing. That's amazing.
The next step. And then once the research and development part has been demonstrated to the point where I can get the proper FDA approval, which costs in and of itself several million, I can pursue the clinical trials, which can cost up to $100 million, I've been told. So that process is probably time-consuming simply because of the financial limitations.
Sure.
And so if someone said, here's $100 million, can you make it happen in 3 years? I would be able to go out and recruit the best of people who can help me make this happen in 3 years. But working by myself with this small team that I have, and honestly, for the last 11 years, I've been the sole person on the bench doing everything from A to Z, with random strangers being kind enough to teach me different techniques in the middle of the night and on the weekends when they're not working in their full day job. And so being able to hire people to come on board full time to work on the project alongside of me can move this along faster. So when people say, how long will it take? A lot of that estimate is just based on me working primarily as the sole person carrying all the research. And I'm still early career, but I have to build my team up. And with more money, I can hire people and we can work faster because there's only one of me and only 24 hours in a day. But if I can train other people to help me, then we can move this along a lot faster.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope that our listeners are compelled and have a heart to support your GoFundMe account. So,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Green, tell me as a physicist, as someone that is in the process of creating something so powerful, what has been really challenging for you along the way? And how have you worked through that? How much time do I have, right?
Very good question. So I have to go back, because a lot of times what gets me through the days, what gets me going in the morning, and I have said this several times, that majority, like 90% of getting my Ph.D. and 90% of staying the course until I got the breakthrough to get the treatment to actually work, it was the psyching, like the whole process of psyching myself out, the hyping myself up, I can do this. And a lot of times we see athletes, go through that get in the zone.
Yes.
And so, like, I'm like, okay, if the athletes can do it, I can do it too. Even though I'm a scientist, I still have to have that game face on, that get in the mode and grind until I can't anymore. And so when you ask me about the challenges, it's like, okay, well, let me step out of that, because I really, literally, in order to survive, had to tune all of that out and get back up every morning and act like nothing happened the day before that could discourage me or that broke my spirit. And a lot of times I said to young girls when I'm mentoring or talking with groups that my journey has been way more spiritual than academic. So when obstacles or challenges, like one of my committee members laughed in my face one day and told me that I would never graduate. Wow. And I was like, that's not funny. That's not funny.
I'm not only going to graduate, I'm going to cure cancer. How about that?
And you should have heard me crying to my family, like, I got to find a cure to cancer in order to get this Ph.D. in physics.
Yeah.
Who has to do this? Mission impossible. And it really felt like that. And so, and you ask, how do I overcome stuff like that? When I was in graduate school, my life literally was go to lab or go to class, study. Sometimes I slept in my office. I would go home, eat, take a shower, pack lunch, go back to school, sleep in the office, wake up, continue studying, continue in the lab. And I would take time to go to the gym, try to go 3 times a week. I would make sure that I went to either choir rehearsal or Sunday or Bible study during the week, Sunday school, sang in the choir, and church on Sunday.
During college?
That was all I did. I missed so many birthdays, holidays, weddings, graduations. Like, I missed almost everything else. That was all I did. So,
But you focused on school and you focused on God.
Yes,
serving.
And that's the point that I was making. So when you ask how did I get over it, like literally my Sunday school class prayed me through, my family prayed me through this whole process.
Wow.
And
I love it.
I know I would not be here if it weren't for those prayers. Because sometimes I did feel like my own were not enough.
Sure.
And, there were times where I'm like, okay, I don't know, like, why am I here? And there was this one time I went to this workshop at church, and it was about, like, emotional breakthroughs or something, and this guy was asking everybody, what are you trying to get over or get through? And people were saying, I used to love to paint, but then I had something tragic happen and I haven't painted in 20 years. Or, I used to play an instrument and I haven't done it in 15 years. So he came to me and I'm like, okay, completely different. But I'm in this physics Ph.D. program trying to find a treatment for cancer, and I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, if I told you that there was a 100-carat diamond in this building and you started looking for it and it wasn't in the first couple of places that you found, that you looked, would you stop looking? No. He was like, if it weren't in the next two places, would you stop looking? No. Because if you're guaranteeing me that there's 100-carat diamond in this building, I'm going to find it. I'm going to find this diamond. And so I literally went back in the lab to go find my diamond. And I had that renewed attitude and energy, like, okay, everything that didn't work, I just checked it off the list. Okay, that didn't work. Let me do this. Let me try that. And then it really was sitting down, and I missed this part of the story, but initially I had to learn the language of physics and then learn the language of cancer. And I treated them like learning a foreign language. And I translated things and put things into my own words and had the side-by-side, my words and my notebook and the manuscripts or the publications about the actual research that other people were doing. And I started seeing this hole in the logic and the reasoning and the data and the results that were being published. And I'm like, I wonder why they didn't do this right here. So I started following the people who have been pioneers in this kind of technology. And I'm like, they were doing this in their studies in the Petri dish, but when they moved to mice, they didn't do this. I wonder why. I think it's because of this little detail right here. So I literally spent 3 years digging into that detail of the chemistry.
Yes.
And that's where my diamond was.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And so
I love it.
I'm like, I kept waiting for people to publish this. And I'm like, well, maybe let me publish it. And they published. And then that's what I got the $1 million grant on. And now I'm like, okay, maybe this is something that I'm supposed to do. I need a little money, but I got it working.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Dr. Green, what you're sharing right now is the courage. I mean, how many people really have the courage to say, I believe I can cure cancer? So talk to me about the courage that you have to take this on.
So when you come from where I come from, like my biological parents were deceased. I was raised by my aunt and uncle. And when I graduated undergrad, my aunt passed away. My uncle lived a few years longer. And I didn't have much family. My first semester of grad school, my brother who taught me all the math and vocabulary words when he was in 4th grade and I was in kindergarten, he died from diabetes and had a heart attack from diabetic complications. So my inner circle is very small. And I didn't have the traditional family structure and trust fund and safety net to call home and quit and go home and say, this didn't work out. I need to have my old room back. I didn't have an old room to go back to.
Right.
I told you or mentioned that my aunt was born in 1932. My uncle was born in 1933. So when I started graduate school, we moved him into a senior citizen, like a retirement center for seniors. So I really didn't have a home to go back to. And it really was no option to sink or swim. You better swim. You don't have a safety net. You don't have a backup plan. And I literally felt like I did not have anything else to do or anywhere else to go. And I had to dig my feet in. And I said, I started this journey. The people who gave me fellowships, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, the Louis Stokes Bridge to Doctorate program. And I'm like, these people saw something in me enough to give me money to pay my salary, which, I'm grateful. It's a stipend, not a salary. Let me clarify. Right. They were enough to, pay my stipend and pay for school. They saw something in me. And I'm like, I owe that to them to finish. I owe it to myself to finish. There are too many people who have taken the time to mentor me, to encourage me, for me to quit. And it's one of those things where I was like, I'm going to graduate and I'm going to do this or I'm going to die trying. And my brother, he jokes about, He was like, the world has no idea how stubborn you are. You don't quit when you have your mind set on something. And that's really true. I've been like that my whole life. I will sit and work with something until I get it. And,
yes,
just when doors kept opening, that was always the little reassurance and the little encouragement that I need, that maybe this is the path that I'm supposed to walk on, so let me keep going. And it would always happen like the night after I didn't quit.
How about late in the midnight hour?
Yes.
I tell you, what you're talking about is very, very honorable, honestly.
Mm.
And so we have other black women that have accomplished great successes, like those that I mentioned earlier. Others, such as those that people think of all the time, Taraji P. Henson, Kamala Harris, Shonda Rhimes, and countless others. But very rarely do we hear about the doctors and the physicists and the dentists and the people making a difference in other industries. I mean, that may not be quite as glamorous. What would you say to someone as they're starting out, whether they're going after a business to have a successful business, whether they're starting college or trying to cure cancer? What would you say to them that's most important?
First thing that I would say is look at your fingerprints. Each of us has a unique set of fingerprints. That to me means that when we were created, we had a unique blueprint and instructions for our purpose in life. That purpose is embedded in the things that pull at your heartstrings. That purpose is embedded in our dreams. And when you quiet yourself enough, your dreams and the things that pull at your heartstrings are made evident. Before that happens, there are things that you are naturally good at, that are things that you were supposed to hone your skill set so that when your purpose is revealed, you are prepared. Had I not taken the time to master the skills in math and pay attention to those details, I would not have been able to understand all of the chemistry and the equations and the details in the science across disciplines, math, chemistry, physics, biology, to find that answer. So, to those women who are starting their careers, I would say hone your skills so that when you meet up with your passion and your purpose, you are prepared to excel, because there is something that you specifically are designed to do on this planet that nobody else can or will do except you. And if you don't do it, it might not get done.
Yes, that's great. That is great. Now, if you could share something with your younger self, let's say 15 years ago, what would it be?
Take a nap.
That is well spoken from a doctor. Yes. But honestly, that's true in terms of rest, right?
Yes.
And stop pressing.
Better. Yes. And yes, we think clearer when we are not sleep deprived. We perform better when we're not sleep deprived, and we're most of the time more enjoyable to be around too.
Yeah. I bet.
And I say jokingly take a nap, but really make sure that you're eating the well-balanced diet, exercise, take care of yourself first as the first priority. And if there was something else,
did you not do a good job at that 15 years ago?
Oh, no, I was invincible.
Of course.
My immune system was impeccable. Like, who needs sleep? I sleep when I die.
T.D. Jakes says the same thing.
Right. And I look back at how many 20-hour days I put in. I'm like, that was unnatural. Completely unnatural. And,
yeah.
And
multiple 20-hour days.
More than I can count or want to count. But yes, I mean, and in the end, the point is hard work does pay off, always. But jokes aside, the one thing that I would tell my younger self is to not stress. God has already worked this out already. Don't stress. Do your best every day, but don't stress in the process. Stress is so counterproductive.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So as I explained in the introduction, one of the greatest challenges African American women face in business is the lack of successful Black women role models in our communities. So let's talk specifically now about some of the unique challenges African American women business owners face and women in general. Before I do that, do you have any idea what the statistic is for African Americans and cancer, and specifically women? Is that very prevalent for us as African Americans?
Certain types of cancer. So, for example, with breast cancer, we may be diagnosed with breast cancer approximately on the same order as Caucasian women, but African American women are more likely to die. Same with prostate cancer. African American men are more likely to die, even though the diagnoses are comparable.
And why is that?
And a lot of that is our relationship with the healthcare system, and that we don't want to go to the doctor, and we don't want to take the medicine, and we don't want to go through the treatments. And I'm calling it, and this is my own terms, the Orly Smith syndrome. That was my aunt who said she would rather die than experience the side effects of chemotherapy and radiation. Her name was Orly Smith. And I know that there are a lot of African Americans who have the attitude that when it's their time to go, Lord, take me in peace. And as a result, things that if you take care of them early, because a lot of the the cancers that are diagnosed early have a much higher success rate for cures without recurrence.
And what would you recommend people do preventative, especially African Americans?
And this is my own personal opinion because I am not a medical doctor.
Sure.
But my own personal opinion is that, especially for African Americans, I would say eliminate most meat, especially pork and red meat, from our diet. There have been studies that have shown that the enzymes, particularly in beef, lead to cancer. So that would be the first thing that I would eliminate.
So we got to change our barbecue family gatherings a little bit.
Oh yes.
No, really, I keep going. Yeah.
Yes, and so a lot of what creates the perfect storm for cancer are the ingredients that we put in our body with the pesticides and the preservatives and the food additives and color and everything that you can't pronounce that's on a package, you probably should not eat. And we need to move back to eating food that has one name and one ingredient, like bananas, apples, oranges, blueberries. And I'm not saying that everybody has to be a vegetarian per se, but to have wild-caught fresh fish that's not farm-raised. A lot of the processed food is not good for us. And I'm not trying to start a war with the food industry, but a lot of the food that we consume should not be consumed by humans. And there are a lot of things that ignite the inflammation in our bodies, particularly dairy. And most mammals don't consume milk from another mammal. Humans are the only ones who do this. And it's not natural. For years, we've seen the food charts that I challenged, but that's not my purpose in life. But I would challenge that dairy should not be on the food chart for everybody, especially lactose African Americans. Mm-hmm. If you are lactose intolerant, that's the first visible sign, but your body is having other downstream side effects to dairy, particularly inflammation, which is one of the ingredients to a perfect storm for cancer. And so if you strengthen your immune system, because cancerous cells come into our body and circulate all the time, a strong immune system fights it off. When your immune system is compromised because of all of the things that have the potential to cause damage to our DNA and damage to our cell cycle, it creates the perfect storm for cancer. So if we can eliminate some of those things from our diet and reduce our levels of stress, exercise, drink water, eliminate a lot of the chemicals we drink in sodas and juice with the preservatives, and really go natural, we strengthen our immune system and fortify ourselves better against cancer. Could someone still get cancer if they did all of these things? Yes, because sometimes it's hereditary.
Wow.
And no matter what you do, it kind of, you're predisposed to it. But if you're not predisposed to it, these things can make a difference. And if you are predisposed, it can add years to your life too. So it never hurts to just have an overall lifestyle of health and wellness.
That's very, very valuable. Thank you for that. And so in terms of, we're talking business, we're talking health, we're talking longevity. Going back to some of the typical challenges for African American women specifically, whether that, again, has been a challenge for you as you have been working towards this path of curing cancer. I'm going to go over a couple of things and tell me what resonates with you as a challenge along the way for you.
Okay.
Family, that they didn't understand your entrepreneurial walk or this walk that you have, this mission that you've been on for cancer. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that unfortunately you have lost some family along the way, but typically that's a challenge.
Yes, and it is. And I still have family members who would say, you've been in school all this time and you're trying to do this, and they really didn't have a concept. Uh-huh. It was a foreign concept to them, and they didn't know how to be supportive. When are you graduating? When I get finished.
Right. Yeah.
When are you going to get a job? When I get good and ready. And so maybe I could have done a better job of teaching them how to be more supportive, but it was not something that was easy to navigate. And sometimes because probably I was more stressed out than I should have been and I needed a nap.
And you needed a nap, sure. Yeah.
I was probably just a little flippant.
No, but that can be challenging, honestly, when someone doesn't understand whether that's an entrepreneurial walk, whether that's an education walk, or a cure for cancer. When someone can't relate, they just can't relate.
Yes, and it's
another.
Mm-hmm, go ahead. No.
Another area that tends to be a challenge for African American women are friends. Friends, of course, again, aren't on the same path and don't understand. Mm-hmm. Role models. Thank God that you were able to do the research and find a black woman physicist that used, her area for the invention of another area. But, we lack role models. Business terms and understanding how to run a business, or even to, like you're saying right now, you're in charge of an entire grant and all the pieces that are a part of that. Mm-hmm. And then another challenge is seeking capital, not knowing who and how to go about seeking capital, where to find it and how to go about getting it. It's huge, especially for a venture like what you're in the process of right now.
Yes. And those are the types of challenges. Seeking capital is kind of like writing grants and getting grants. If you don't have a relationship with people, it's so competitive.
Yeah. And are you writing your grants yourself?
I am. I
guess you could use a grant writer.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because in graduate school, nobody teaches you how to write a grant.
Right.
Or at least nobody taught me. I never took a grant writing class until I started taking faculty development workshops and training programs that would have grant writing workshops as part of their weekend retreats or week-long retreats. But that was after the clock already started, once I became a faculty member. But even in the process of doing business development, I'm at the crossroads of, do I go get an MBA? Who do I trust? A lot of the business developers who are eager to partner with me because they see dollar signs and not just the passion of helping people, they want to exploit what I'm doing just to make money.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have the 20 years of business experience that somebody who can come to the table and say, yes, I've taken, 15 medical devices to market. I want 80% ownership of your company. I'm like, whoa.
Right.
And then, side-by-side comparison, someone who I can't point to anything on the market that they've taken to, I can't point to anything that they've taken to the market personally, but they're saying, yeah, I can help you, introduce you to venture capitalists and help you raise money for your research, but I want 60% ownership. And they're like, well, you got to cut up the pie somehow, and 20% of a large pie is better than 100% of a small pie. And I'm like, but I don't like your recipe because you don't know how to cook with a good
and your
heart.
division.
Yes, no. So you mean to tell me that you want to come to the table with the promise of a venture capitalist investing in me, and you want 60%?
Right.
You know how long I've worked on this? This is my baby. And so there is a place where, what is it, how much do I have to sacrifice to get a quality business partner for a fair trade and exchange of the ownership of my business?
I'll tell you what I'd like to see. I'd like to see us as African Americans join together, and you decide what that percentage would be. And whether, much like the Obama campaign, when we join together, what if we all together raise, the money that you need, and we became venture capitalists in your project? Gosh, there's a lot of power in our community.
Yes. And one of the things that happened, because I wasn't on social media when the news of the grant went around the country, and there were so many people who showered me with emails of how proud they were and invitations to come speak at their schools and their Boys and Girls Clubs, and the cancer patients who want to know when can they start clinical trials. And it's like, I woke up on January 6th and the whole world was talking about me. And I didn't even have a Twitter account. People were sending me screenshots of me on Twitter and Instagram and Baller Alert, and then it's like, then it's in the New York Times, and then, all of this stuff is happening. And I'm like, okay, I know that people are proud and people want to see me succeed. But now that I'm putting things in place and the grant's getting ready to start and I'm putting up the GoFundMe, I have been able to raise $10,000 in less than 30 days without really having the time to devote to fundraising, because that's not my full-time job. I'm trying to be in the lab working on the treatment, and it's not my passion to fundraise, but I know that is required in order for me to take this to the point where people can walk into a clinic somewhere and ask for it. So, that that process to get the $10,000, it was only like 127 people who made that happen for me.
Nice.
And I'm saying that that was the $5 and $10 donations, the $100 donations, and one really huge $4,555 donation that one individual made who wanted to remain anonymous. But that group helped me make one of the payments to the patent attorneys. And so it felt good to know that I'm not carrying this whole burden by myself.
That's right. as you're trying to help the world. It's kind of a bummer when you're carrying the burden yourself to help the masses.
Right. It would be so nice not to have to worry about how to fund all this. Like,
sure. Sure. We're gonna figure that out for you. We're gonna figure that out.
Thank you.
There are many articles online about entrepreneurs and their success stories or challenges they had to overcome, but there are very few about current-day women and everyday business owners that aren't celebrities and what they've gone through, and definitely not specific articles sharing what African-American women have gone through. And so I'm so honored to have this time with you because I know this will inspire someone along their journey for business, for school, for whatever it is. So when you think back, what didn't you have along the way before you got to the point that you are now that you wish you would have had?
Along the way, it would have been really nice for someone to encourage me while I was in school, in undergrad, being really good at math, to get a double major in business.
The support.
That support, yes. And having that critical piece of information would make this whole process so much easier. Because I have zero experience in marketing, clearly.
But now you have a Twitter account.
Now I have a Twitter and an Instagram and a professional Facebook page.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying. But I'm like, it seems like I would be a marketing expert's dream right now. And the little things that I'm talking about seem like, in a couple of days, all of this could change. And someone or several people could say, you know what? I'm going to make your research or your research foundation the heir of my estate. And,
how about that?
and I'm like, stranger things have happened. Or somebody might wake up in the morning and say, you know what? I've been hearing about this young lady. Let me make a difference in what she's doing so that she can make a difference for a whole lot of people. So it could happen. Yeah. And having that kind of, because I don't come from the world of people who operate on that level. So some of the things, I'm like, okay, well, let me take the limitations off my mind, because there are people who are making $40 million donations in a day. Yes, without missing the money. So things can happen. Nothing is impossible. So,
and when we pull our networks and resources together, that's when that begins to happen.
Yes. Yes. And so, yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to switch reels just a little bit, and we're going to have a little fun. I'm going to complain about something, and then we're going to figure something out, okay?
Okay.
So our black businessmen are showing us out, and that's not going to work. So Tyler Perry has his homeless to success story. Eric Thomas, the motivational hip-hop preacher, has the homeless to Ph.D. story. So, Dr. Green, what I want to do, us ladies have got to get our stories out and document it so African-American women in general have some inspiration when we're feeling low, when we're searching online on what different women did through challenging times. So together, let's craft your rags to riches story or hero story. So I'll let you start, and then I'm going to jump in and try to come up with a little something as well. What would you say?
What I would say is that if I can go from being, at 18 months, a motherless, fatherless child who went to stay with grandparents who both died by the time I was 4, who went to live with an aunt and uncle, and who one had a 3rd grade education, one graduated from high school. They had already raised all of their children. The youngest was almost out of the house, and I was 4 when they took me in. To come into a family where nobody had gone or graduated from college, to get a full academic scholarship to Alabama A&M University really was a chance for me to make something happen in life. To go to Alabama A&M, learn the language of physics, then come home, and the aunt who raised me take care of her as she died from cancer. The uncle who raised me take care of him as he went through the treatment. And to come up with an idea that I can make a difference in the way that cancer is treated in America, set out to do that thing, spend 7 years in a Ph.D. program in physics, actually get the treatment to work in mice, become the second African-American female to get a Ph.D. in physics from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, to be the 76th in the country to do so. So I'm less than 100 black women in the country who have the qualification of being a Ph.D. in physics. And then saying that within 2 years of my first job, I'm bestowed the honor by a group of my peers that says my research is worth $1 million career grant. To pursue my dream that far, to come to this point. And I think about when I was 4 years old and 5 years old, and I used to ask God, why me? Why didn't I have parents? Why didn't I have grandparents? Why didn't I have a traditional family? To going to college on a full scholarship, why me? And I shouldn't forget this part, but my senior year, by the time my senior year came, I had done so much community service at Alabama A&M that my peers elected me to represent them as Miss Alabama A&M University. And I was a tomboy before that happened.
How about that? That's a good one.
And so, like, at that point, you know, I'm having these workshops and seminars to inspire people that if I can just come to college on a full scholarship from my background, what can you do?
How about that?
Right. And now I'm like, if I can find a treatment for cancer that's working in 10 minutes so you don't have to keep coming back, and this can possibly be an alternative to chemotherapy and radiation, and I can get $1 million grant by figuring out how to write grants. And not that I'm even the expert at it. It took me 3 tries to get the grant, but I still did it within my first 2 years. And I say that with all humility because there are some people who go their whole careers without getting a grant this size.
Sure.
So I'm humble and grateful, but I'm also look at what God has done with me.
Yes. And Dr. Green, your parents, did you lose your parents to cancer?
My biological parents, no, I did not.
Okay.
Well, actually, my father, yes, but my mother died in an accident.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe your story would be from, I don't know, we'll play with it, but from parentless child to curing cancer, or to from parentless child with losing family members to cancer to curing cancer. How about that? Something like that.
Yes. And, you know, I usually say, like, from tragedy to triumph. My lemonade story, taking lemons and making lemonade. Because if I look at the tragedy of all the people that I've lost in my life, and if I had stayed stuck in mourning and grieving and never turning that and transitioning that into what can I do to make a difference? How can I be the change that I want to see in the world? I would have never thought to try to do something about it.
That's perfect. And tragedy to triumph is perfect. Yeah. So as we look forward, and African-American women in business and African-American women, period, are, growing and growing businesses and moving forward, what can you say that would help us move that number even further to become successful million, multi-million, and billion-dollar business owners?
I think the same kind of creativity that you see the average black woman express when she puts on her outfit in the morning and she wants to look different, that's innovation. When her hairstyle can't look like anybody else's, that's innovation. If we tap into that innovative spirit that we carry when we make things work and hook them up and create things all around the house, that's innovation. If we take that innovative spirit and start applying it to things that we can generate revenue, we will create more multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar companies than any of our counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to have the confidence to know that when my grandmother was in the kitchen making recipes without a measuring cup, that gave me my foundation. Yes, she was innovative, but that also gave me my foundation in chemistry. So if I start translating what I already know and learning the new language to something that I don't know, all of that experience translates.
Yes, it does. Yes,
the techniques that I had when I was braiding hair as a child, paying attention to detail and making sure that everyone was exactly right, that precision and accuracy translated directly into my science. So I would challenge any woman who has an idea to take all of her experiences and to step into any arena and dare to explore it, learn the language, and conquer it. Almost everything we touch as black people, from music to sports to entertainment on any level, and even science. When we look at the George Washington Carvers and the Neil deGrasse Tysons and the Madam C.J. Walkers, when we do it, we do it. So
yes,
it's not
yes, we do.
So it's not even a matter of not having the examples. It's we have to have the confidence and eliminate the distractions in our lives in order to focus long enough to get it done.
Excellent share. So, Dr. Green, I know you've got a big vision ahead of you, but what impact would you like to make as an African American woman over the next 10 years?
My dream is to change the way we treat cancer in America. I want to go from being the African American physicist who won the $1 million grant for cancer treatment research to being the entrepreneur who brought the treatment to market to offer an alternative or supplement therapy to chemotherapy and radiation. In the next 10 years, I want to put this in clinical trials and demonstrate that in a side-by-side comparison to the drugs that are currently on the market and the current therapies and the current standards of care, that my therapy can outperform or improve the performance of the therapies that are currently available.
Excellent. And can you share 5 success tips with us? What your five success tips are?
Yes. The first would be stay grounded spiritually. My journey has been more spiritual than academic at every step of the way. That would be the first. The second would be manage your time. I've talked about the 20-hour days, and sometimes that was necessary because I don't watch the clock when I'm working. I focus on the goal, and that's the time that I'm managing, the time that it takes to do what I'm trying to do. And then everything else fits in around that. It's important to have work-life balance, but when Beyonce is in the studio preparing and when Michael Jackson was in the studio preparing, they were doing 20-hour days too. They weren't watching the clock doing an 8 to 5.
Perfecting their craft.
They were perfecting their craft. And I'm like, if they can do it. And I joke about people don't see Beyonce, or people don't see female scientists as much as they see Beyonce, but I'm actually a huge fan of hers.
Yes. Yes. And if I may, I mean, the 10,000 shots that Michael Jordan and different people talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And watching the Michael Jordan story, when he talked about how late at night he stayed up practicing his free throw shot, that inspired me. I'm like, okay, if they can do that, I can commit to my science like that.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing would be persevering. That stick-to-itness, that toughness, that I won't quit. If this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to commit to the process, no matter what happens. And yes, there were times where I may quit that night. I'm not doing this anymore. And one of my favorite cousins, Kelly, she would give me my pep talk. Okay, when you finish quitting tonight and you finish pouting, when you get back up in the morning, you go back to that lab.
Yeah.
And it's not that it comes easily to persevere, but it's a process. No matter what happens, sometimes you play hurt. Sometimes you play when your feelings are hurt, but you still get back out there and you do it every day until it's done. The fourth thing I would say would be managing stress. Having a well-balanced diet, exercising. Of course, this ties back into having a spiritual life, meditating, whatever it is that you need to do, because stress can undermine your health. And if your health is not taken care of, everything else that you're trying to accomplish becomes secondhand. Because if you're not healthy enough to do it, then you can't accomplish the goal at hand anyway. So you have to take care of your health and manage your stress. That's all one part. And then the last thing I would say is managing your personal life. When I was in graduate school, I mentioned my closest brother passed my first semester. And this was right on the heels of losing my aunt and going through chemo and radiation with my uncle. And I had friends who passed, people got married, people got divorced, tragedy happened, cousins passed away. There were all kinds of distractions. Katrina happened, Rita happened, the wars were going on. Like, there was so much chaos in the world while I was in grad school. And there were times literally when I would watch the news and start crying because it was so heartbreaking to see all the tragedy that was happening. And in the world, and then the phone calls that are coming in, the tragedy that's happening in the lives of the people who are around me. And all of those things pulled at my heart, but I couldn't let that distract me. So I would say, regardless of all of the life distractions, breakups, deaths, health issues, stay focused on the goal. And that reminds me just really quickly, and I'm not a Bible scholar, but I love my Bible stories. And there's this story where Jesus is telling the men in the boat, don't focus on the storm, stay focused on me. And one of them is trying to walk out the boat. Jesus is saying, come here. And the storm is happening. And as soon as he starts focusing on the storm, he starts to sink. And Jesus said, I told you to stay focused on me. And to me, that means if you stay focused on your goal, if you stay focused on your purpose, if you stay focused on your calling and stay focused on your whole spiritual realm, all of the other storms in life are going to happen. We're not exempt from those storms. And even when they happen, stay focused. And you can walk on water, fly to the sky, sail on the moon, whatever it is that you set out to do, you can do the impossible if you stay focused.
And even cure cancer. I love it. I love it, Dr. Green. You know, thank you so much for taking the time. I know how valuable your time is and sharing. And this this mission that you're on. I applaud you for it.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me this platform to share my story, to get the word out, and to hopefully have more people support me and rally behind what I'm trying to do. And I always take the time for opportunities like this, because I don't know what little girl may sit around and hear this and decide that she wants to be a scientist or a physicist like Dr. Green one day.
That's right. And can you recommend real quickly 2 books that every woman should read?
2 books. The first one would be The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. That book helped me understand the kind of input or commitment and time that most successful people invest in their careers, in their craft, before they become the overnight success. And that backstory that we don't usually hear. So I think that is the book that took the limitations of, it's supposed to take long. It's not supposed to be easy. There are going to be challenges, and all of these people had all of those challenges before they became the overnight success. The second book would be The Tao, which is spelled T-A-O, but it's pronounced Tao if you're being correct. But it reads like Tao of Womanhood, The Tao of Womanhood by Diane Dreher, D-R-E-H-E-R. And it's the principles of power and peace. And that book, I read through it so many times when I was in graduate school about challenging my power and my voice and learning how to say no and doing laundry on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday instead of waiting until Saturday morning 3 weeks from now when it's piled up and stressful. And being able to schedule time for myself to go ride my bike or take a walk or have a picnic and put that on my calendar right in the middle of all of my business meetings and all of the planning that I'm doing. And it was just a really helpful book for me to try to find some balance and some peace and some power, and to know that I can be autonomous and make decisions, and it's okay if I say no to this businessman who wants 60% of my business, right. And he doesn't have any money bringing to the table.
And feel good about yourself saying no.
Yes, and I'm like, and I've had some people say, I can't believe you said no to him. I've been waiting my whole career for an opportunity like that, and you just passed it up. And I'm like, no, if it were right, I would have known it. Yep. It would have felt right, and he would have had more equity in the situation for me, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And so the Tao of Womanhood is a very good book for me.
Well, thank you again for sharing your knowledge with our listeners. Where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
Okay, few places. The first would be on my Facebook page, Dr. Hadiyah-Nicole Green. Hadiyah is spelled Hadiyah. I am also on GoFundMe /Dr. Green, which you can also get to from my Facebook page. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Dr. Hadiyah Green, and LinkedIn at Hadiyah-Nicole Green. Yes. So I think I'm findable.
I think you're findable. And I hope that listeners will reach out and at least invest in what she's doing. Mm-hmm. So thank you for joining the show today. And everyone remember, lead with value and the revenue will follow.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.